I can write about homophobia in my life in ways that no interviewer could ever capture.
I mean, a lot of our patients take from 10 to 20 medications a day. I mean, what is it like?
It's very important for us to not just think about the other, but, connect, emotionally.
That's what qualitative inquiry is about, isn't it, as opposed to the quantitative?
So it's difficult with people whose work we've sort of known for so long. How did we first come across Carolyn Ellis?
I was in the library at Bristol and just looking through journals, and there was a picture of her and her mother, and it was so unusual in a journal to find a picture.
I was going to stop you there because I've just been interrupted by a giant clown.
Who's that clown that's
It's so big.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've certainly felt like with the Across the Tamar project, we were really sticking our noses out, speaking of Pinocchio, really taking a risk by singing songs that we'd written about participants' lives, gathered during a funded, a contracted research project. So to have somebody of Carolyn's, stature, but reputation to actually, be positively responding to that was very important, I think. So let's catch up with your conversation with Carolyn at the 2016 Congress.
And we're at the last moment of the Congress of Qualitative Inquiry. And Caroline, what I've been trying to understand is, do we need qualitative inquiry?
I mean, qualitative is broadly defined, but I tend to be on the humanities end of qualitative research, which to me is about narrative and autoethnography and bringing a qualitative perspective to your work, but then presenting it in a literary way so that it is readable and evocative for people who might not be in the academy. It's important for students. So I'm now talking about
Why
the kind
do you
of
see it's
research.
important to your students? I mean, because we have students that say, well, we're physiologists. Why do we need to know about that?
Well, again, I have to keep going, and you want me, I assume, to go to the kind of research that I do. Well, I don't care who you are. You have to live in the world, and you have to figure out the world, and you have to be able to hopefully take the role of the other and be reflexive about yourself and who you are and your motives. I mean, I just kind of take it as a given that all those things are really good things. They're good things because they have the potential to help us just be fuller, more thoughtful people who end up having tools to understand other people, to work with other people, to get along with other people.
Maybe you could just say a little about that in your research practice. What do you mean by being reflexive?
So what do I mean by being reflexive? I think of it as, it's a little different from the way people describe it, but I really think of it as being tuned in to the voices in your head, so that you are not just like blurting out the first thing on your mind, assuming that that's what you think, assuming that that's truth and that's the only way to look at the world. You quietly listen and let all the voices speak. And these voices are coming from culture and relationships and socialization and all those kinds of things, and you just give them the opportunity to speak to each other. So you're not just listening to the loudest voice, you're letting them all talk back and forth and ask questions of each other and make you think about or reflect on the different ways to see the world, and perhaps who you can be, want to be. It's just you're just kind of constantly thinking. It's not just thinking, it's thinking, you're feeling, you're letting yourself feel, you're just like being as fully involved in the world and what's going on as you possibly can be, and trying to do it in a non-judgmental way. I mean, we are judgmental, but it's not, being judgmental is not necessarily all bad, but you just like, let me just let this evolve, let it open up, let it develop before I decide how I think and feel about it.
Day in autoethnography, you talked about your work with Jerry. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that.
About that work? Oh, I love that work. Oh, I was fortunate to interview Holocaust survivors. 7 years ago, I interviewed 45 survivors with some graduate students. And during that time, I met Jerry Rawicki, who I just was fascinated with, and I was fascinated with all the survivors, but he kind of stood out because he really was involved in wanting to understand his experience during the Holocaust and his experience since and what had happened to him. And he was open to developing his story with me rather than just bringing a set story there and dropping it on me. And so I started to think about, how we might get people, survivors in particular, to tell different stories than they've had told before, or to tell them in a deeper way, or to me, like in a way that's closer to the way we share stories in everyday life and learn from each other through stories and learn about ourselves through the stories that we tell and hear. So I've developed a long-term relationship with him for 7 years, where we get together, and sometimes I interview him with a video camera and everything, but sometimes we just have dinner together, sometimes we walk on the beach together, sometimes we go for a ride together. And as I talked about the other day, the best time we had together, the most important time, was when I went to Poland with him. And we went back to some places that he remembered, and we let his place memory kind of take over and stimulate him to tell stories that and have memories that perhaps he had not had before, which he did. They were really new memories, and even going back there really changed his perspective in some really important ways for him. So this research is, my goal is, or my mantra is, it's not so much like what can I get out of him, but it's what can I do for him. So how do you do research in a compassionate way that's good for not only the person you're working with, but other people like him, other survivors, and is readable by other audiences.
Compassionate interviewing. That's something that I've read in a paper you wrote a little while ago. Could you just explain how that differs in sort of concept from how people think about interviewing?
Well, when we think of interviewing, we think of the interviewer asking questions and the interviewee answering. And so in compassionate interviewing, I see it more as a joint performance. You're working with the other person, not doing research on the person. And so you dedicate yourself as a researcher to having a long-term partnership, to not only be a researcher with the person, but you become a friend. You become someone who you really come to care about the person. They come to care about you. I want to do research in a developed relationship, because I think that people tell stories differently in conversations that you might have with someone you know than they tell to a stranger. And I think people tell stories differently in developed relationships than they tell to a stranger. And so I wanted the advantage of all of that. Plus, I really enjoy this. I enjoy thinking about the possibilities of what he and I can do together. And I see him so involved. He's as involved in it as I am. And it's what a partnership. I mean, I don't think I could go back to doing research on others. I have to be in partnership with him. And so compassion, a lot of it is feeling between you, and that compassion, that feeling has to be there and has to be growing and developing between you.
Are there any other sort of ethical issues that you sort of see in qualitative research that you think are really important to talk about and raise like that?
Well, I mean, to me, the ethic that I think most about is how do I do research, and you can't be sure of this, but how do I do it in a way that I think is the best way I can do it to bring something to the other person. And it's not that I don't want to write a paper afterwards or whatever, but I want to learn from them, and I want to take their experiences and apply them to mine and see if I can come out of it a better person too. But primarily, I want to feel that my research has the possibility of bettering their life and even bettering the world. And those sound like either cliched or global kinds of goals, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't have them. I still have them.
I like what Carolyn was saying there about I take it as a given that we write personally. You know, there are so many sections of the academic community that we move in that aren't like that. They don't take it as a given. Students, the PhD students that I'm supervising, at the start of their studies, that is not the case. They have to get to that point, and I had to get to that point as a student as well. So I think it's very important that there are people around that have been doing this for a period of time that demonstrate, their work demonstrates the importance and the value of it, that can then say, look, this is our starting point now. We've moved on, you know, the personal narrative, autoethnography is fine. Evocative work, absolutely no problem. I think hearing Carolyn speak here has also reminded me once again of the, you know, to use the academic speak, that hash between the auto and the ethnography. So I think I did consider Carolyn primarily as an autoethnographer. That's what I saw her work being about. And now I'm more aware that actually no, her work is also about others' lives. So she is using her own life, her own experience, the emotions that she feels, the only emotions we can ever feel, our own, but also now relating and working with participants who have very different experiences.
Really interesting, her talking about not wanting to go back to the traditional way of doing research interviewing anymore, wanting to be in, you know, very much in collaboration and in relationship, mature relationship, I think she talks about.
Yes, working with participants rather than on participants, learning alongside, learning together rather than necessarily learning.
And aspiring to that, you know, this will in research enrich both of our lives, not just, oh, this helped me make it out of my career and I've learned a lot from that. It's, you know, are you learning anything from this?
And what the phrase that we've used, you know, in our own work, doing research with people, not research on people. And I think then Carolyn's taking that another level in what she's talking about here, in actually doing research for people as well. So, okay, what does this person or these group of people, what do they want and need? How can this research be relevant and helpful or meaningful or important or useful in their lives? Which is surely what it should be.
Hello, sunshine, take my hand. I'll follow the breeze if I can. Got so much loving just beyond my grasp. I'm taking the bends, I'm taking them fast. So keep watching and keep waiting, with patience in your hand. Finally waking to the morning with a dream that you understand.